Good evening, class. Tonight we're going to talk about principles, definitions, and a little bit about the scope and jurisdiction of the code. Now, this would be the first class where Tier 1 and Tier 2 are doing the same thing. Tier 2, I know I had some of you guys last year, of course, but I don't know about the rest of you, just how much of the code you covered. What I'm afraid of is if I don't cover this, Tier 3, 4, and 5 are more centered on problem solving, things like that, not so much going through the code. So, anyway, with that, let's get started. If you have code books, this is on page 81. Now, on 81, this is the beginning, the principles, the scope and jurisdiction. It's got all of all of the chapters listed here. The table of contents, I guess you could call it, at the top of the page. And what I did, and I suggest you do, is to put the page number that matches up with the section, which of course is a chapter. For example, 1001 is page 81. 1002 is also on page 81. 1003 is page 84, and so on, all the way down to section 1023, which is on page 232. Okay, so it makes it a lot easier when you have to refer to something in the book. You can go to this page and get the page number and the section. Okay, at the bottom of the table of contents, which is about halfway down the page, we have the scope and jurisdiction. It's a very short chapter. It's only a very short paragraph, so I'll cover that since it's so brief. All right, now what they're saying here is jurisdiction. Now, one thing you should know, especially those of you that I didn't have last year, this book is part of the general laws of the state of Massachusetts. It's it's 248 Code of Mass Regulations. Uh, so when you see a lawyer running a commercial and he's got all those impressive books in back of him in his law library, they don't use them anymore. They use a computer. But in there will be one of these code books, right? Bound with like a leather cover. So a lot of this code book is written in legal talk. It's not very exciting. Sometimes it's a little hard to follow, but it's the language they use for enforcement and everything else. So if you look on page 81, we'll get started, and you'll have to get by the way they phrase things. All right, first thing is jurisdiction. It says nothing in this code shall be construed as applying to. So what they're saying is, here's a list of what's not covered by the code: refrigeration, heating, cooling, ventilation, or fire sprinkler. Okay, so those trades, even though they're similar, are not part of this code. So if you have a business and you get involved in doing any one of those, uh, heating, I suspect you might have that covered with your insurance, but the other trades, you wouldn't be insured for refrigeration, cooling, or ventilation, or fire sprinklers. One, you're not licensed. Two, you're not insured. So be careful if you get involved in that once you get your license, your plumbing license. All right, let's get started with the basic principles. There's principles that run from one. Now, this is on page 81 for those of you who have a code book. And I believe my tech support person, my wife, Maureen, will send these out. But if you don't get them, just pay attention and you can refer to them in your code book, or if you get a chance to download them to you, especially tier 1 guys. All right, so it goes to principle number 1 to 26. Tonight we'll cover 1 to 13. We'll see how they go. Now, I have to apologize in advance. There's nothing exciting about any of this book, right? The definitions are deadly. The principles are slightly better. At least that's my opinion. But they are not exciting. So let's do principle number 1. Now, what the principles do is to outline in broad strokes the whole code book, and they do it in 3 pages. All right, the first one is all occupied premises must have potable water. Okay, first of all, potable water. It's not potable, it's potable is the right word. I know it's not a phrase or a word we use on the trade. However, it's something you should know. And potable water is any water that's fit to drink, bathe, uh, do anything, everyday use of the water. So let's read what it says. All habitable buildings shall be provided with a supply of potable water. Such a water supply shall not be connected with unsafe or questionable water sources, nor shall it be subject to hazards of backflow, back pressure, or back siphonage. About the easiest example of backflow would be a heating system, hot water heating. Now, most of us, probably most of you, have done some hot water heating systems, and you probably all or most of you are familiar with the backflow preventer. Years ago, probably I'm guessing the 60s, because I know in the 70s we had them, backflow preventers, but probably back in the 60s, you could see it in the old heating systems you uh, either are altering or replacing. They didn't have a backflow preventer. The problem is, if the water pressure in the house, not so much in the city, but in the country where you have wells, goes down to zero, in theory, the water from the boiler can go back into the house, since the boiler pressure is somewhere between about 15 and 20 pounds. It could be a problem. The water is obviously very, very dirty and could be dangerous. So the water source that you have in your home should be free from any kind of possible contamination. Principle number 2, adequate water provided. All right, they mentioned adequate water would be enough water. If the faucet's partially blocked, I'm sure you've all seen this, you have to take the screen off, clean out all the debris, put it back together. But before you do, you'll notice how the water is just trickling out. That's why you get a phone call that the faucet's partially blocked, or it happens at your own house. They mention, I don't have the page number here, but they mention a pressure of somewhere around 8 or 10 pounds. It's absurd. Okay, the pressure you want, good pressure in any house, especially if you worked on well pumps, you know that it's somewhere around 50 pounds. It gives you a good flow. You don't have to wait too long to fill up the sink. It gives you a good shower. You wash your hands. It's good, but it's not too much. So somewhere around 50 pounds is good. If it's under 30 pounds, you're going to start getting people squawking. 20 pounds, you're definitely going to have people complaining. Okay, so I would suggest, even though the book says like 8 pounds, you might want to study it, make so you'll know what they, in case there's a question on it. But in real life, about 30 pounds would be the absolute minimum. And if you're setting a well pump, we usually set them around 40 cut in and 60 cut out. Okay, so that it ranges between 40 and 60 pounds when you turn the faucet on. All right, that was number 2. Number 3, hot water must be supplied in all habitable buildings for plumbing fixtures which utilize hot water for sanitary or hygienic purposes. Okay, again, any fixture that requires hot water, a sink, a shower, a tub, so on, if it has a hot water faucet, it should have water to it. Now, the only place that I can think of, and some of you have seen this, I'm sure, you go into an old-fashioned bathroom in like a garage, a repair garage, for example. I can think of one right off the top of my head that I just used this year in Tiverton when I had my car worked on. And you go in there and the hot water is not connected. All right, that's not unusual, and I haven't seen anybody that has really uh, got in trouble because of it. If you're working there and it's going to be inspected, and you're replacing like a sink or the bathroom is being redone, you would have to tell the owner, I'm going to have to put hot water here. All right, you can't leave it like that. You can fix the faucet and do some minor work, and it's, I guess you could say it's grandfather. Nobody's going to bother you about it. But as soon as you replace it, all the grandfather rights are gone. And my guess is, even years ago, it wasn't legal to hook up a faucet without a hot water. So that would be principle number 3. If you need hot water, you got to put it in. Principle number 4, next page, water connection. They mention water conservation. One sentence, that's it. Okay, a real quick review on water conservation. The water closet maximum in Massachusetts is 1.6 gallons per flush. Okay, you can make a note of it. I know some toilets are 1.5. I'm guessing that some states must have 1.5, so it's easy for them just to do a 1.5 rather than have 2 different styles. But in Mass, it's 1.6 per flush. The let's see, would be 1 gallon. Or you could also make note that the urinals would be 1 gallon flush. Okay, that'd be your water conservation. And then the shower heads, they're low volume shower heads as well are required. Okay, but they only give you one sentence here, and there's a lot more to it. Dangers of explosion from overheating. They mention devices for heating and storing water. Translation: T&P valve on your water heaters. Okay, um, if you need a T&P valve, you have to put it on. You can't leave it off. Most of these are just common sense. Now here's one here this is number 6. That was number 5. Number 6: required plumbing fixtures. Doing a new house. What do you need for plumbing fixtures? Okay, most of these here you probably all knew before you even got into the trade, but let's read them off. A toilet, a lav, a sink, bathroom sink, a kitchen sink, a bathtub, or a shower, either or, one or the other. And then a laundry facility requirement. They have a laundry facility requirement. A washing machine connection that consists of a piping arrangement. Okay, that's a P-trap and a standpipe, a cold water supply, and a hot water supply. All right, so what that would be probably a P-trap with a 18 to 30-inch standpipe. Usually you just get a piece of plywood, shoot it into the wall with like a Hilti gun, and just clip on the standpipe and P-trap, and then get a like a Watts clothes washer valve. Or if you want to get off as cheap as possible, a couple of shutoffs, a couple of boiler drains, and drop in 90s. Okay, that's about as cheap as you could go. Don't use that much anymore. Years ago, even when I started out many years ago, a lot of the bathrooms were the clothes washers were being moved up to the first floor. So you don't get so many in the basement anymore. But when you do, that's the cheapest way out. But you do need a connection. You don't need a laundry sink, but you need a connection for the clothes washer. The laundry sink would be optional. And then they get into the multiple dwellings. This is more for test question. All right, if you are questioned about how many clothes washers for, we'll say, a high rise for elderly or whatever, for each apartment, there has to be just one clothes washer connection. Okay, that's it. And elderly is even different. I guess they don't use the washer very much because they only need one clothes washer per 20 units. Strictly a test question from the book. Nothing I'm sure you'll ever see in real life. Okay, that was principle number 6. That's probably the biggest one out of all of them. It mentions on the next one here, number 7, that the plumbing drainage system must be installed, designed, arranged, constructed, and maintained to protect against falling deposits, solid stoppages. Additionally, adequate cleanouts shall be incorporated. All right, they just summed up many, many pages of the code book in one sentence. All right, of course we're going to install it so it works properly if we follow the rules. And you have to put in the adequate cleanouts as prescribed by the book. So here we have many pages from the code book reduced down to one sentence. Like I said, this is just kind of a summary. Now the next one, durable materials and good workmanship. The piping and other components of the plumbing system must be manufactured of durable material, free from defective workmanship, and designed and constructed to provide satisfactory service for its reasonable expected life. As an inspector, and some of you just might be inspectors someday, this is a very hard one to enforce. It's very difficult to tell somebody that their work is terrible. It's a mess. But usually what I found is if the work was a mess, there was usually violations in addition to the poor workmanship. So, you get them on the code violations. I don't remember telling anybody directly that their work was sloppy or whatever, because if it was that bad, it was usually also in violation of the code. Examples of poor workmanship. My idea on that would be glue cleaner, the purple cleaner. running down the pipe because somebody wasn't careful enough to make sure that the pipe was tilted up enough so that it didn't run down the pipe when you put the cleaner on it or the fitting. And solder that runs down the pipe. If it does run down the pipe, you can't get it off, but at least you can clean it up. So it just kind of looks like silver pipe. But other things like the pitch of the pipe, yes, it's 1/4 inch to the foot, except for 4-inch pipe where you can go to 1/8 inch. But it has to be uniform pitch, which is later in the book. It has to be the same pitch. If you go 1/4 inch, you can't just suddenly go to 1/8 and then back to 1/4. It's got to be, if you start at 1/4, you stay at 1/4. And if you stand back and look at the pipe, it's very easy to see if it's not uniform. Like I said, I'm getting off a little bit onto good workmanship because this book doesn't give you much of a guide. I didn't inspect in Mass. I was in Rhode Island, but in Rhode Island also, good workmanship might be mentioned in passing like this, but it doesn't give the inspector much of a guide to go by. And the materials, they mention materials, durable. We have nothing to do with the materials, nothing whatsoever. If the materials are approved by the state board, fine. It's in the code, probably carried by your local supply house. If the material is not in the code books, just stay away from it. Okay, even if you think you're going to approach the board because you want to try something new, it's going to be a big production. So my advice is go with what the code already has approved and stick with that. Don't put in anything that's not part of the Mass Code. Okay, principle number 9, need for traps in a plumbing system. Okay, every fixture directly connected to the drainage system must be equipped with a liquid seal trap. The drainage associated vent system must be designed to provide adequate circulation of air in and throughout all piping. Trap seals shall be protected from the dangers of siphonage, leakage, aspiration, and so on, which we've done in class. The ways a trap can lose its seal. Again, this sums up a much larger section in the code book as far as installing traps and the rules and regulations for it. Now, one of the videos you're going to see, if you haven't seen it already, shows and I think this one is from this old house. They're installing side-by-side P-traps in the basement, and they use double Y, and that's a 3/4 S trap. I'm very surprised that they did that rather than a double TY, but 3/4 S trap is not approved. Okay, the liquid sealed trap, like I say, this is just one paragraph from many pages. A couple of quick things on liquid sealed trap. The trap is 2 to 4 inches deep, right? And that's from the top of the dip. There's the top dip, bottom dip, up to the weir of the trap. Okay, it's 2 to 4 inches deep. And if that trap is going to be sitting there for more than a few months, you're going to have some way to recharge that water and or put something in there that won't evaporate so fast. Sometimes floor drains are a problem because they don't, unless that floor is getting washed with a mop and a bucket and a lot of water, it's not going to be it's not going to have any more water added to it, and it could be a big problem. So sometimes you'll put in a thing called a trap primer. You guys in Tier 2 have probably seen that. Some of you have. I think we talked about it last year. It's a device that when another faucet is opened up, a little bit of the water goes right down into the trap. There's a little pipe that runs directly to that trap, and maybe a few percent of the water from a faucet or something diverts down to it through a T. Okay, so the traps, and we will talk. We have talked about them. We will continue to talk about them in the future. Are a number of pages long, and they handle it all in one long sentence here. Okay, principle number 10: special precautions for oily and flammable liquids. All right, oily and flammable liquids pose a health problem, safety danger if not properly disposed of. And this one here is again a no-brainer. That when you store when you have automobile garage, commercial type, they they should not go down the drain. And those repair garages, or even a residential storage over, I believe it was 5 cars, you have to have a gasoline trap, right, to catch the gas and oil before it can get down the drain. But you can't throw any of that down the drain, which I'm sure you're aware of. All right, the next one is principle number 11, the need for venting the plumbing system. Vent terminals. Now, vent terminals, let's do a quick review there. The vent terminal is the pipe where it enters the air outside. Now, when you have a vent going through the roof, remember it's 18 to 24 above the roof, and right where it enters the air, they call it the vent terminal. It shall extend to the outer air above the roof and be installed to prohibit the possibility of vent obstruction and the return of sewer gases into the building. Okay, why is it 18 to 24? It could be a lot shorter. In Rhode Island, I believe it's 12 to 18. All right, they figured that the snow on your roof is not going to be probably deeper than 18 inches or so. And if it got much higher than that and then it froze, then it'd be like putting your hand on the vent and it wouldn't drain. Now, a real quick story here. One of the last jobs I did in Little Compton before I became the inspector there and couldn't do any more work in that town, which was a good idea. At the time, I didn't think so. You don't really want to work in the town you're inspecting in. People would come to me to do work, knowing I was the inspector, figuring that, obviously they wouldn't have any problem with the inspector. And I'm glad that that was the rule. But that can vary from town to town in both states. But as far as the vent goes through the roof, we can talk about, in theory, it's going to like block the venting and all that. But I saw this happen firsthand. It was a modular house. It had come probably from Pennsylvania over the road and set up. It was a nice house. It was, the usual side by side, the two boxes side by side. And once you went inside, unless you knew what you were looking at, you couldn't even tell. And I connected everything in the basement. There was nothing on the first floor that required my attention, right? Everything was piped all the way up and out. So in the basement, I connected the pipes. They were all clearly labeled. And it was just a matter of a piping exercise. Excuse me. So once I got everything hooked up, turned the water on, flushed the toilet, it was like, it didn't overflow, but it swirled around and swirled around. It didn't really flush. Tried the faucets, all the drains were slow. It was like there was a partial, not a complete blockage, but a partial blockage. I couldn't figure out what the heck it was. So I'm walking around, not really know what I'm looking for. So in the basement, where the pipe, I guess it went out the wall or went through the floor. I can't recall now, but there was a dandy clean out that I had installed. So I unscrewed the dandy, and as I did, the water didn't come out. The air went in. I could hear like air going in and water going down at the same time. I guess I relieved some of the vacuum that had been created. So with that, knowing that was something going on in the system, I went up in the attic, again, not knowing what I was looking at. And what I found was that the stacked vent went up into the attic and didn't go straight out the roof. It went horizontally for about maybe 3 or 4 feet, maybe 4 feet. Then it went out the roof. But nobody had supported that elbow. The roof flange was holding the elbow up. That's not really the way to do business. Somebody should have supported it either with a hanger, blocked it up with 2-bys or something. They didn't. So what I'm guessing happened is, as this house went over the road and hit bumps, that pipe just kept slipping down inside that rubber boot. And to the point where, if you can just picture it at an angle, when it rained, eventually there was enough rain that it filled up that pipe and blocked the vent entirely. So when I got up into the attic and I saw that, I lifted the pipe up, and I could hear the water running out, and it also broke the seal. It wasn't glued very well, so I cleaned it and re-glued it and propped up the pipe. End of the venting problem. So it really does make a difference. So if you do a job where you have to cap off some of the vents that pop out at a lower level, like on a lower roof of a building, some of you guys have done that. Otherwise, it can't fill any higher than the lowest vent. Don't forget those test caps, right? Those gym caps, and get them off before before you leave the job, because it's going to cause a lot of trouble for somebody. All right, that was number 11. They mentioned testing. Now, this also is this is a section in the code book. It's actually one of the early sections, testing the system. The plumbing system shall be subjected to such tests as mandated by the code. 248 CMR. They refer to that. That is our plumbing code within the Mass state laws. And you do that effectively to disclose all leaks and defects in the work or the materials. Now, all of you guys, tier 1 and 2, I'm sure you're familiar with. There's a lot more to testing than one sentence. Real quick, a few things about testing. You can test with air, 5 pounds per square inch, and you can test with water, which would be out the stack, right? This is for drainage. Out the stack, the inspector has the right to tell you, I want to see the water come out the stack. Now, I've heard of some guys doing some clever things like putting an inflatable down inside the stack so that all you have to do is just fill the last couple of feet of the stack and the water will come over it'll look like it's full. The problem is, if you do have a leak, the owner will be calling you and not the inspector. So don't pull something smooth like that. Test the system and test it before the inspector gets there. Because if you get cocky and wait until he's there or she's there to do an inspection, to do a test, you might get lucky for a while, but sooner or later you're going to have a leak and you have to drain that system and repair the leak. And the inspector's not going to stick around. Most inspectors have more than enough work and not going to stick around. They're going to get very annoyed. They'll leave. You're going to get a reinspection fee, and you might have to just wait for the inspector to get around to get back to you, even though there's 2 business days. Let me tell you, it might just be a little longer than that. So always test your work before the inspector comes out to see it. Okay, that was number 12. I'm going to call it at number 13 because that's halfway through these principles. There are a lot to do all at one sitting. So number 13, harmful substances to be excluded from the plumbing system. Now, they did mention oily and flammable liquids in a previous number 10, and now they're back to it. Seems like this should have been part of that. No substance that will cause or exacerbate, make worse, clogs or stoppages in pipes, produce mixtures, destroy the pipes, or interfere shall enter the drainage system. And it mentions you have to special wastewater discharges containing such hazards must be collected and disposed of, tested prior to entering the system. Okay, real quick, what they're not saying here is if you have acid waste, like in a chemistry lab in high school or junior high. I remember seeing that at the school in Little Compton. They had special piping. I think it was either green or it was blue PVC. It was very different than our regular piping. And then it went into a sump, and I think it was limestone, which would neutralize the acid waste coming into it from the testing. In commercial applications, it would be a much bigger scale, and all of that would be approved by somebody a much higher pay grade than us to be designing these systems. We just install them according to the prints that have already been approved before we even put them in. And another one would be we already talked about the gas, oil, the gasoline trap would be a problem if you have a harmful substance into the system. But one thing to keep in mind, if it's a city sewer, the rules are the same. But let's face it, you can put stuff down the drain that you shouldn't. And if it doesn't block the pipes, it probably is just going to go into the sewer and out to the river and get treated on the way out. But if it's going to a septic system, way different. Okay, if you want to rinse out paintbrushes, throw chemicals down a drain in your own house, remember when it gets into the septic tank, the bacteria in the tank that keep like a balance of the breaking all the waste down, you're going to wipe them out. So be careful what you put into a septic system. If you're going to put antifreeze into the drains to winterize a house, and some of you guys, especially if you're out in the country, you might have accounts. I know a few businesses, and when I was an inspector, I'd stop by and I remember seeing them. I have like a wall of keys, like bigger than a door, and it'd be all the keys for all the summer people that would leave in the wintertime, and these plumbers would open it up in the spring, close it down in the fall. Now, the traps that you can get to, my advice is to take the clean out off and leave the clean out on the sink or the tub or whatever it is, fixture that you're working on, so it can't get lost. If you can't get at the trap between the floors or whatever, or it's in a poured floor, only use non-toxic antifreeze. Do not use car antifreeze. The stuff is extremely toxic to us or to bacteria, which is like living organisms, in the septic tank. So be careful what you put down in a septic tank. Car antifreeze doesn't make it. It's also quite expensive. So use non-toxic antifreeze that you can buy at your supply house. For those of you who haven't done this, they sell two types of antifreeze. One is for cold water application, like traps and things like that, and it won't freeze, of course. And the other one is usually like a red antifreeze, and that one can be used in a heating system, for example. If you have a heating system that might freeze up where it goes along a wall that's unheated, you can probably do a 50-50 mix. This isn't the place to tell you how to do that, but if you mix the water, the boiler water, with half antifreeze and half regular water, tap water, that's usually a pretty good mix. It'll get you down well below freezing as far as before it will cause a problem. So that's the other kind of antifreeze. A little more money, but both of them can be used in a trap, like in the floor. So if you winterize in a house, non-toxic antifreeze, either one will be fine. But if you're doing a heating system, of course, you can only use the hot water version. Now, one of them is blue. The water is actually blue, like Windex, and the other one is like a red pinkish tinge, so you can't get them mixed up. Okay, so those are an example of the principles. Those are actually in 2 pages, just about two, actually less than 2 full pages. We just covered half the code book. Okay, I'm going to stop it here and switch over to another video, and I will be back in a minute.